Fifth generation leader for the People's Republic of China is in fact led by Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Li. Li has been fairly inconsequential, however, because she has taken on so much power since 2012 and 13. Xi Jinping is a princeling, Li is a populist. Those are the two factions right now in Chinese politics. The princelings by far have the upper hand. And remember, princelings are, in fact, those leaders now whose parents were Revolutionary era comrades in Mao's era. The Chinese dream was Xi's original catchphrase, if you will, and he was alluding to the want for national rejuvenation and prosperous China economically, and a strong China internationally as well. Xi emulated Deng Xiaoping by going south on a southern tour. Xi also went to Mao's home area to honor him and to cement himself in that same vein. And Xi has gone after a number of things from a policy standpoint. He has loosened the hukou system so that it's easier to get from small to medium-sized cities. It's still very difficult to get from a medium city to one of the super cities, but easier nonetheless. And remember also that the hukou system has been abandoned by China's floating population because of the massive numbers, 200 million members of the working class from central China have migrated toward the East Coast in search of work. So they've given up their hukou, and the Chinese Communist Party has looked the other way. The Strike First campaign has been directed against the Uyghur separatist movement. There is a separatist movement, a secessionist movement in Xinjiang, not actively in Tibet, but in Xinjiang there is. Corruption, tigers and flies are the two brands of people Xi said he's going after. The tigers are the bigwigs, the flies, the smaller level corruptive people, but he has said he will spare no one, and a lot of times the tigers have in fact been his political rivals. Xi has gotten rid of the one-child policy, so now all Chinese couples can have at least 2 kids. They still utilize re-education through labor, and that is not always admitted. It still goes on, and the re-education piece, the socialization piece, has certainly never been so evident as it is right now with the detention camps for hundreds of thousands of Uyghur up in Xinjiang. Foreign policy-wise, they have tried to cement themselves in a more economically advantageous way and initiating way with the Belt and Road Initiative, and so that is one that is a Xi Jinping era foreign policy initiative where the Chinese are pledging infrastructure help all over the world and capital help all over the world, and looking for political influence in reality in return. Lots of human rights violations under Xi Jinping. He is cracked down big on human rights lawyers, everything from booksellers to activists and artists and bloggers. There are just, it has continued, and it has been really ugly under Xi Jinping that there are so many people who have been, in fact, arrested, imprisoned, and some held incommunicado. Biggest cult of personality since Mao, like we talked about, and he has carefully orchestrated that. I said tigers and flies. When you go after a big guy like your former security chief, you know that you're going after the tigers there, and that's an example of Xi Jinping utilizing that tigers and flies philosophy. Under Xi, there have been a couple of different documents put out and things circulated. There was one put out called Document Number 9. That was within the Communist Party, and the party warned its members against talking about discussing things like constitutional democracy in a Western way, any sort of promotion of universal Western values, media independence, civil society, anything that was extremely neoliberal and pro-market without allowing for China's state capitalism, and then any sort of criticism of the party's past, the traumatic past with lots of mistakes, to avoiding that nihilistic criticism because what purpose possibly would it serve? Same kind of thing. Universities were given the 7 evil subjects, and the 7 evil subjects to avoid included what you see on the screen here. And again, it's the same principle. It's Western values, quote unquote Western values, universal values, civil society, avoiding mistakes of the party in the past, corruption, and judicial independence. And those are to be avoided by universities. Xi has also put in play his idea of the 4 comprehensives, which in his mind involved comprehensively building those things, a moderately prosperous society, along with deepening reform, vague, yes, governing the country according to the rule by law. Please note what it says there, everyone. It does not say rule of law. It says rule by law. 2 very different things. And enforcing strict party discipline, once again engineered in a lot of times, or in a lot of cases, by the Central Commission for the Inspection of Discipline. Some of the reforms have come about under pressure from accidents they've had. In 2015, there was a series of explosions at Tianjin, and there were 173 people killed. Again, this was the case of lack of regulation, as chemicals were stored very dangerously. They have had some tragic high-speed rail crashes where it has been so much development so quickly. Lack of safety and regulations has cost a lot of lives in China. So the party grapples with that rapid development. They also grapple with economic problems such as the following. Unemployment, inequality have come about with the market reforms. The Iron Rice Bowl has been done away with. The inefficiency of the state sector. China still has all sorts of state-run enterprises. State-owned enterprises is the formal term for them, SOEs, state-owned enterprises. And they are largely inefficient. They are wonderful for patronage and wonderful for corruption. And they're very difficult for the party to either manage, get rid of, or make more efficient. Pollution is the big problem. Also, of course, first the economy, then the environment. And the party is dealing with some of the effects of that. Lots of social protests as a result of that. Product safety, also with, again, lack of regulation and lack of transparency, as we saw with the taint milk scandal and some other items that popped up. Referenced it already, so I'll bypass it. Three Gorges Dam is the biggest hydroelectric dam in the world, and it was meant to produce about 1/10 of China's power at one point, and I don't know what the actual percentage is now, but it's an attempt by the Communist Party to be more green in its energy usage, so it's an example there for a shorty, if you get it. The one-child policy, just from an overall perspective now, Deng initiated it in the late 1970s to reduce China's population growth rate. It did work, but with the bride trafficking, with the female-male imbalance that came about because of the want for male children, with female abandonment and infanticide and sex-selective abortions and so on, lots of second and third order effects to the one-child policy, lots of social frustrations with I'm sorry, I'm totally distracted. There's a typo on here, and it's really driving me nuts. So anyway, I have no idea what I was talking about there. It was something about the one-child policy being responsible for, yes, second and third order effects and social frustrations of young Chinese men. Xi has gotten rid of it. All Chinese couples can now have 2 children, and I must get off of this page and stop staring at the unfortunate spelling of weakened. There is China, if we weren't aware, and we have talked about areas such as Tibet in Xinjiang. There's Hong Kong, we have Taiwan. So from a mapping standpoint, Xinjiang and Tibet are both autonomous regions on paper. They get autonomy more so politically, educationally, religiously on paper. That does not happen in real life, as you know. The Communist Party exercises major political and religious controls and the infusion of the Han population into both of these centers. Hong Kong is classified as a special administrative region, so it's a different classification altogether, coming back into the fold after 1997. Taiwan is a province in China, and it is the renegade province, and the question of reunification or sovereignty always rears its head in scary ways. So we will touch on those. Taiwan is formally known in their eyes as the Republic of China. It was formerly the body that held the United Nations seat for China until the 70s, when relations were normalized. Increased economic ties with the mainland, seemingly minor but major things like direct flights between the mainland and Taiwan have more tied the mainland to Taiwan over the last couple of decades. But the incidents like the Taiwan Straits crisis of '95, when there was talk of independence, and the Chinese show of missile force right off the coast, and the U.S. response in the region, things get ramped up very, very quickly. And Xi Jinping seems to really be focusing on utilizing that principle of one country, two systems that was originally used for Hong Kong, but same principle now being used for Taiwan, where you have it's one country, one China, but two systems. The Xinjiang the autonomous region of Xinjiang, the Uyghur population has historically been predominantly Muslim. They are the group that has Central Asian tendencies and so forth. Tibet is right here with the Tibetan Buddhist ethnicity and religion. So again, on the periphery are Chinese, these two ethnic groups in autonomous regions, and similar controls politically, religiously, and socially that I referenced earlier. We talked about the big riots in Urumqi, the ethnic cleavage erupting into the open in July of 2009, where you had days of riots where ethnic Han and ethnic Uyghurs went after each other in response to allegations of a rape on the East Coast, after which the Communist Party imposed an entire media blackout and electronic communications blackout on the area for many, many months. The attacks that were in and around this time caused Xi Jinping to go and implement his strike first policy. The most notorious was, in fact, the March 2014 attack in Kunming, where you had the rail station attack with 29 dead being slashed with a bunch of Uyghur separatists' knives. There's the remnants of the rail station, and again, the purging of independence-minded Uyghur elements, anything suspicious, life in prison for professors who they accuse of it. And right now, the big story, of course, is the detention in about 5 locations of upwards of 1 million different Uyghur who are being re-educated and socialized, and you can certainly call it brainwashed. So a major human rights violation, with Muslims being held in massive numbers there, and the world should be outraged to a much greater degree than we're seemingly showing. Religious controls, like I showed you in class, there are Muslims in a mosque in Xinjiang bowing, not toward Mecca, first of all, but to the Chinese the People's Republic's flag. Hong Kong returned to Chinese rule in 1997 after the 99-year lease that the Brits had on it, after which it had become the financial capital of East Asia. They did bring this back very pragmatically, did the Chinese, under one country, two systems. There are Deng and the Iron Lady conducting the business of managing the reunification of Hong Kong with China. July 1st of 97 is, in fact, when the handover took place. Hong Kong has maintained much of its semblance of economic freedoms. The political freedoms are something that freak out the party, so the party has been loath to give them too much political freedom or allow more, and that has led to the demonstrations that we saw take off, especially in 2014. With the protests in regard to the Communist Party not allowing the people of Hong Kong to choose their own chief executive in 2017, kicking off the umbrella movement, the umbrella revolution, if you will, led by people like Joshua Wong. We talked about the language being Tiananmen-esque. They didn't use force in this case like Tiananmen. They waited the protesters out, but that phrase unimaginable consequences certainly was seen in 1989. There's Mr. Wong, again, and leading the charge in a lot of this. He continues to be a major activist in Hong Kong. Good example of he and his buddies being civil society in Hong Kong. Hong Kong did get a new leader named Carrie Lam, and she was not chosen by the public in an ultra-democratic way. There was a vote, but it was not the universal suffrage with all candidates that the Hong Kongers had wanted.